Welcome back. All right, so power rankings time for your Saturday. By the time this goes up, yeah, it'll be Sunday technically, but it's still Saturday night. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do this again. The last power rankings, as next week is the All-Star break. So this is the last power rankings before the All-Star break, and next week it will not be a regular power rankings video that will go up. It will be a video I will pre-record over the next couple of days. That will go up in its place, and it'll be something to do comparisons and things of that nature. I've been doing some comparison stuff today and fascinating some of the stuff that I've found, and so it'll be fun to go through that. I've been doing power rankings a long time, and it really kind of hit me today just how long I've been doing the power rankings on this channel. They've always been the most popular videos and the ones that generate the most negative discussion, but hey, they generate the positive as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. At number 32, same spot as last week for Arizona. So for the Coyotes, it has been a better week for them. Generally, they get that win over St. Louis. They had a good game against Anaheim tonight, but I still left them in 32nd. I felt like the other teams that are at the bottom of the league are also winning games that they're probably not expected to. So that kind of stays in the same spot. And here's one of the reasons why. So number 31 is Columbus. Columbus is winning some games they're not expected to either. They had a decent run through Alberta. Then they had the rough game against Vancouver. They played all right against Seattle. But again, you know, they've played well enough that I think 31 ahead of Arizona. I still think that's probably the right spot. And Arizona lost a lot of games before this week. So there's some definite need for seeing this over a longer period of time. And yeah, I mean, they still lose that game against Anaheim tonight. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to move Arizona up this week. Number 30, dropping one spot from last week, Chicago. So for the Blackhawks, they got a big win this week over Calgary. Again, these teams at the bottom of the board do tend to get wins. They've won 7 of their last 11. They've been good and they've been bad. Sometimes night after night, you'll see them really, really good one night, and the next night they're lost again. For Chicago, it's not about the games, it's about playing for pride. And for Stauber, as a goaltender coming in this week, he played really well. So it is guys fighting for jobs, fighting for tension, fighting for jobs, and maybe understanding what's going on with Chicago, making themselves more attractive potentially to scouts who might be in the building. Lots of scouts in buildings right now. There's huge rows of scouts. It's going to be a busy deadline. I know there's people who think it's going to be a deadline. I don't think so. Number 29. Also dropping one spot from last week is Vancouver. So for the Vancouver Canucks, what they did this week was they beat Chicago and they beat Columbus. Now Chicago and Columbus are in this spot on the board. So Vancouver ends up 29th, and that's where they're at. For Vancouver, I mean, other than the firing of Boudreau, which we knew was coming a long ways away, this is a team that even with a new coach, and I know he's 2-1 so far, this team has a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to be done by the Vancouver Canucks. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't think tearing everything down is the way to go. I know there's people who want to see it done that way, but I think it's a bad move if you're going to just tear the entire thing down. Just gutting a roster, I don't understand it, especially when it comes to young players. All right, number 28 on the board, dropping one spot from last week, is San Jose. Now, of course, for Vancouver, I'm using the Lunar New Year puck that I got from Van Base from the Canucks store. I like it. This is about the only time that I can use it because Lunar New Year was this week. So, yeah, and I'll probably be finding one too at the Anaheim store when we're in Anaheim this week. I'd like to find hopefully a puck that's Lunar New Year themed as well, and I'm going to get a bunch of stuff from Disneyland. Hey, we got 6 rabbits in this house, so the fact is you're the rabbit. You combine rabbits with hockey logos, I'm kind of all over that. So the San Jose Sharks this week, getting back to the power rankings, they dropped one spot. Now, they did beat Pittsburgh, right? But overall, really, San Jose's playing out the string. I thought that said more about where Pittsburgh's at right now. Pittsburgh's having some problems. They're definitely having some problems, and I'm starting to really doubt whether or not they're going to make the playoffs, which is crazy because they've had these really dramatic shifts in the positive and the negative. For San Jose, their game, they can score goals. Keeping the puck out of their net's been a bit of a challenge, but we know they can score. And, I mean, if Erik Karlsson were to be traded at the deadline, that would change quickly. But for San Jose, yeah, they end up 28 this week. Number 27, dropping 2 spots from last week, Montreal. Montreal, much like the other teams that are at the bottom of this board, they're capable of, on any given night, giving you a really good effort and making you earn it. They're also capable of going out and laying an egg, like they did tonight against the Ottawa Senators. So, it's that whole life is like a box of chocolates, except in this case, it's a bag of rocks, and you just don't want a bag of rocks. Life is like a bag of rocks, and you just want to throw it over there. So it wouldn't have been a hit movie that way. So Montreal's 27th. They drop a couple of spots, and we'll see if any of them move 2 weeks from now. Keep in mind this week it's a very light schedule, so next week it's going to start getting really busy again. Then at number 26, and moving up dramatically, Anaheim. So that's 4 spots ahead of where they were last week. 26 spot, I think, is the highest they've been. I think that's the highest they've been this season. I'll be talking about that, though. There's a series of videos I want to make over the next couple of days. I'm hoping I'll have time to get all of that done. And I want to talk about each team and how they're doing. And so Anaheim, honestly, I think they've been playing well. They're going out there, they're giving it an honest effort every night. And that's really what you want as a GM. You want a team that's going out there and working hard. Even if you don't, want them to win too much, you want to see that effort, and you want to see that they're playing well and they're sticking up for each other. And in the case of Zegras, I think he's starting to come into his own. I mean, beckoning a guy to the penalty box, sure. Number 25 on the board this week, and moving up 1 spot from last week, just the 1 spot too, is Ottawa. So Ottawa's back at NHL 500. This has been their issue this year. They get back to NHL 500, and then they start losing again. And then they're having to fight their way back to 500. They need to get above 500. They need to start to make a move, because the East is going to be tough to make the playoffs. I would say 93 points, 94 points in the East. In the West, it might be more around 90 points, 89, 90 points to make the playoffs, at least with the way things are looking right now. But yeah, for Ottawa, if they're going to get to that number, they're going to have to start winning, and they're going to have to win a lot. And they're going to need some help too, or to just help themselves when they're playing a divisional rival. So yeah, Ottawa's 25th. They're at the front of this row here. We'll see where they are next week. Number 24. And dropping 3 spots from last week is St. Louis. For the Blues, it's been ugly. It's been really ugly. And I've seen comments about how they have the worst save percentage in the NHL now, and their defense has been brutal. And this is all true, but they're also having issues scoring goals. We saw this week they were having trouble with the goal scoring too, which was not supposed to be part of the problem. So for St. Louis, everything's falling apart. Apparently Barbashev, there's a lot of interest in him. There's going to be interest in Tarasenko. There's going to be interest in O'Reilly. Odds are all 3 of those players are probably going to be done as St. Louis Blues by the deadline. And then do you do a quick retool? My guess is yes. I don't think this is a team that needs a rebuild. I think they're just having a bad year. I think there's a lot of guys on this team that are just having really poor years, and it's just all kind of feeding on itself. And so, usually that will mean a change behind the bench, but I don't think Craig Berube's going anywhere. I think that meeting would go very, very quickly to, okay, so you get to keep your job. Please put me down. So yeah, number 24 is St. Louis. Number 23, moving up 1 spot from last week, Detroit. So the Detroit Red Wings move up 1 spot from last week. They're now 23rd on the board. They are also in the position of unlikely to make the playoffs, but I don't have them in this row here. I don't think they belong there. I also don't see them being in the second row after the All-Star break, but we'll see. There's still enough games left in the season that they could go on a run. They could move up the board, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Number 22, moving up 1 spot from last week, Philly. The Philadelphia Flyers right now are getting wins because John Tortorella has got his message through. They're shot blocking. They're playing defense. Carter Hart is having another good season, but now he's got the defense playing well in front of him. Whatever Tortorella's doing is working. And so I think Torts has definitely earned himself another year behind the Philadelphia bench when this one's done. The fact that this team is 500, and I know there's 9 overtime and shootout loss points in there too, but being this competitive, they were supposed to be down in this area, and they're not. And there have been points where they're kind of on a run, and you think, could they get back in the race? And we'll see. I don't think so, but we'll see. I didn't think they'd be that high on the board either. Number 21, Dropping one spot from last week is Pittsburgh. The loss against San Jose tonight, yeah, that hurt. It hurt, and this is a team that needs to start stringing some wins together too, because they're in the playoffs, they're above the playoff line, but part of what's been helping them is that the teams that are beneath them haven't really been lighting the world on fire to catch them, and so they've kind of had that good fortune, but I think that's going to change because you got Buffalo up and coming. The Islanders have now won 2 in a row, so for Pittsburgh, definitely it's a tenuous position they find themselves in, and Florida has started to really play better as well, so Pittsburgh has to get this thing rolling. Maybe the All-Star break will be perfect for them. Number 20. Dropping one spot from last week, the New York Islanders. This is the reverse retro puck from a couple years ago. Because it looks virtually the same. So that's why I had to say something, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to tell. But for the Islanders, they get the win tonight over Vegas. They've won 2 in a row now. But the overall week is what drops them down a spot. Again, 2 weeks from now, we can check back and see where they're at. Barzal with the goals. There's the one line that's able to score for them right now, so that's good, but they need other lines to start scoring. It's the storyline we've had going with the Islanders for about 6 weeks now, that their scoring is just kind of gone. And so they need to find a way to get that to go back, because the goaltending's really good. Their defense is solid. It's just they need to score more goals. Number 19 on the board, dropping 2 spots from last week. The Flames. So for Calgary, yep, they went and beat Seattle. Yep, and that was after Chicago made it look easy to beat them. I don't have any trust in Calgary right now. It's just they've been too mediocre too often, and the overall numbers for Calgary not great. Now what's interesting is Dan Vladar is on an amazing run himself, but the team in general, it's just they're spinning their wheels a little bit too often. And I'm wondering if they're going to stay in the playoffs too, if the second half of the season, well, after the All-Star break. Sometimes it's referred to the second half of the season, but if after the All-Star break, if they're going to get on some kind of a run. Because there will be teams that come out of the All-Star break, and this 9 or 10 days off, however many days each team has, it can really rejuvenate them. So for the Flames, I do hope they turn it around, because I like to wear Flames gear. I like the Flames. I've talked about this before. Maybe that's part of the problem. San Jose's been awful since I stopped hating them. I think that's what the problem is. Number 18. And moving up 4 spots from last week is Buffalo. Now, it's not the dramatic rise that I think Buffalo fans will be looking for, but that's where I'm comfortable having them right now. They had the overtime loss tonight against Minnesota. I didn't penalize them for that. I didn't move them up. I didn't penalize them. I felt like they played a good game. That felt like a playoff game. A lot of them are feeling like playoff games, and that's why scoring has been slowly coming down. As I said in the recap, I think there was 5.7 goals per game tonight, if my math's right. And so Buffalo's playing well. They're showing, too, that they can play in those tight one-goal games, and that's important. Because if they're going to be playing important games into March, they have to be able to play all those various kinds of games. Usually in the second half of the season, the scoring will come down. Usually it's more tight checking, and the penalties kind of stop getting called. So Buffalo has to be able to play that kind of game. They moved up 4 spots this week. Number 17. Moving up 1 spot from last week is Nashville. The Preds are hanging around. They're hanging around, and there's every reason to think that with UC Saros in net, they're capable of getting hot and maybe making the playoffs. This absolutely could happen. The funny thing is, they were predicted to make the playoffs by most, but they've been mediocre and below the line long enough that, there's that doubt that creeps into your mind. But for Nashville, they're playing well enough that they've been slowly moving up the board, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're top 16 next time out in a couple of weeks. And number 16 on the board, dropping 3 spots from last week, the Capitals. So for Washington, injuries are taking a toll, and Tom Wilson being out again, and she's got to be banged up, even though he's been playing. He's banged up. Ovechkin misses a game as well. Things just not going the way that Washington wants them to recently. They've won, I think it's 4 of their last 10 as well. So overall for Washington, there's some work to be done here after the All-Star break. And once again, maybe guys get healthier and you end up with a much better team after the break. But they end up 16th. Number 15, also dropping 3 spots from last week. So I saw a comment on the channel. I didn't answer it, which was, go ahead, put Vegas 32nd. And that was after the loss against the Rangers. I'm not going to be that dramatic with it. The board really should not be that dramatic in its movement. Because then if they have a good week the week after, it has to be dramatic the other way. And this is something I try to explain to people, that I will move teams around. The dramatic movement will happen at times, but in general, it's usually the smaller movements one way or the other. And so for Vegas, they have made their way down. They were 5th. They dropped to 8th. They dropped to 12th. Now they're 15th. So they are moving down. And so if this keeps going on, they will be 18th or 19th 2 weeks from now. So that absolutely could happen. But there's also that belief in the break, right? So it's possible they end up moving back up after the break. Number 14. Same spot as last week is Florida. So dramatic comebacks aside, I have some concerns with Florida. Lions provided them with competent goaltending, but I have some concerns with Florida. And the comebacks from behind, as exciting as they are, we've had this discussion with Florida before, going back 3 years ago with the, So for Florida, they're in the same spot. This is still above the line. This is still top 16. Now, they're not above the playoff line currently, but they're not that far below it either. So again, Pittsburgh has to get it going, or else Florida's going to pass them. The Panthers are able to score in bunches. I do have some questions about the goaltending and the defense in general, but they're playing well enough that they stay in the same spot as last week, and technically pass Vegas. They pass Washington as well. They get passed by 2 teams on the board. Not by this one, though. At 13, Minnesota. Minnesota drops 2 spots from last week. The Wild have had, they had that road trip through, the Valley of Death and the East Coast there. When you go through Florida, Tampa, and Carolina, you generally don't come out unscathed, as Boston's finding out this week too. And now tomorrow, Boston gets to play Carolina, so wunderbar. But for Minnesota, it's been a rough patch for them. They did come back and win that game against the Sabres tonight. They never held a lead in it, but they won it in the shootout. So maybe that'll start to get things going for Minnesota, and maybe the break helps them out too. Definitely Fleury's game's been better lately as well. So while they drop on the board, there are reasons to be positive when it comes to Minnesota. Number 12, and moving up 3 spots from last week, Colorado. So the Avs, it has been remarkable to see. And again, it's different. The Shushkin's not in the lineup, and then things don't seem to be working. But then today they work, and Makar was out for a while, but then he comes back. There's so many guys in and out of this lineup so often that it's got to be hard to create chemistry, and it's got to be hard to find that quality that gets a team on a run. But haven't they won like 7 out of 8? I think it's 7 out of 8 now, right? So yeah, Colorado's finding a way. And this is bad news for the rest of the Western Conference, because once Colorado ends up above the playoff line and healthy above that playoff line, I don't think they're going to go out. And I think they could very well end up being the best team in the West by the end of the league again, or by the end of the season again. Like, they could end up back into this range by the end of the season if they keep putting wins together like this. Number 11 on the board, moving up 5 spots from last week, bam, the LA Kings. So thus the jersey, the puck matches the jersey. The Kings, here's the funny thing, I still have great concern about their goaltending. This is a team that's been in first place in the division, and yet the goaltending, I have tremendous concerns. And today's game against Tampa didn't necessarily assuage those concerns when it comes to Quick. Copley's had some good games, but they need that playoff goaltender. Now people are starting to say, well, maybe Demko goes there. And maybe, but Demko's having a really, really rough season. And he's been injured for longer than he was supposed to be. So I don't know. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But the Kings could probably use a goaltender at the deadline. But who do you pick up? Who's going to be available that really improves things? And again, Demko, I don't think is the answer. And it would cost them a lot to get Demko. But we'll see. Number 10, so we're moving into the top 10 now. Number 10, dropping 2 spots from last week, is Dallas. They can't win in overtime, so they drop. 3 straight overtime losses. Holding leads has been an issue as well. Getting a full 60 minutes or a full 62 or 63 or 65 minutes has been difficult. And so, for Dallas, they end up dropping. The weird thing is, last I checked, they're number one in the West. I don't know what that says for the West in general, because I don't watch Dallas and think this is a team that is going to win a Stanley Cup. They're going to be one of the better teams in the West. But when I watched them in their last game, I mumbled to myself that this has all the earmarks of a team that goes out in the first round. That finishes really high in the regular season and people are excited, and then they lose in the first round and people are saying, why? What happened? And I don't think that for a lower seed, for one of the wild cards, I don't think they're going to be as scared of Dallas as one might expect when you're playing against a division leader, should they end up winning the division, which again, Colorado might have something to say about that. Number 9 on the board, dropping 5 spots from last week. Winnipeg's out of the top row. Now, for Winnipeg, this has been a precipitous drop. And again, 5 spots in a week is a lot. So the Kings move up 5 and Winnipeg drops 5. That game against Philly tonight, that was just a nightmare. And it's not the only one they've had. The game against Buffalo was awful. Buffalo looked dominant in large stretches of that game. Winnipeg has got to get this together. I don't know what's happened to the Jets, but isn't it like 5 out of 7 they've lost? It's been kind of ugly. So the Jets need to get this turned around. But again, we have the break. Definitely need a reset. Definitely need a reset in Winnipeg. Things have gone tremendously wrong. I talked about Dallas and how teams wouldn't be scared of them. Right now with how Winnipeg's playing, I don't think a Western opponent would be scared of Winnipeg right now either. So there's plenty of time to get it back together, but at some point, you run out of time. We're past the halfway mark of the season. The games get really important after the All-Star break. Winnipeg has to up their game. Number 8 on the board, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Oilers. So for the Oilers, pretty strong run for them. They lose a game against Columbus, which was, obviously embarrassing and whatnot, but I didn't punish them. I didn't move them down for that. I think Edmonton's playing well. The win tonight over Chicago was dominant. Putting Matt Berlin in net was a nice touch at the end of the game. And him getting a save was perfect because now he has a perfect save percentage in the NHL. You can tell his grandkids about that. That goalie's not so great. Did I ever tell you I had a perfect save percentage in the NHL? Yes, Grandpa. So anyways, for the Oilers, they're back in the top row. The Oilers have not been in the top row for a long time. This has been a while. Let me go back. It's been a while. It's been since the first week in November. So the Oilers being back in the top row. There you go. Number 7 on the board, moving up 2 spots from last week, the New York Rangers. So for the Rangers, I'm really happy with the way everything's going with the Rangers right now. The scoring is there. The depth is there. I still keep seeing people saying, "Oh, Lafreniere sucks and he's a bust and blah blah." And anytime I see those comments, I think, okay, so you don't watch the Rangers, which is okay. If you're just basing it on points, I totally understand it. And you're right, but there's more to it than points. There's more to certain guys' games than just the points. And for the Rangers, they don't need it. So the funny part is they don't really need all that offense from Lafreniere because you're getting it everywhere else. So he's doing all the other little things and improving his game all around. Their blue line is really good. Adam Fox might be having a better year right now than he did when he won the Norris Trophy. Not that many people are paying attention right now because Carlson gets all the attention and Morrissey and Winnipeg was getting all the attention a couple weeks ago. But people maybe should start talking more about Fox. And Shesterkin, I think, is rounding into form. So things are going pretty well. Not only that, but Halak has been giving them very good backup goaltending. So after a rough start, he's playing the best he has in, I would say, 3 years. All right, number 6 on the board. And dropping 1 spot from last week is Seattle. So for Seattle, top row yet again. Second week in a row, third week in a row they're in the top row. So there you go. Seattle now is residing in the top row, and this looks normal to everybody. In fact, Seattle's in this row, Vegas is in this row, and it's not a joke. This is bonkers, isn't it? This season's turned out quite different than expected, and for Seattle, they could very well win the division. I do have concerns when it comes to the goaltending, and yet Grubauer's getting better. Jones has been very hot and cold, but when they're good, they're very good. So at least you have two goaltenders in Seattle. Maybe it'll be goaltending platoon come playoff time. Maybe you play Grubauer in game one. Maybe you play Jones in game two. Maybe one plays on the road, one plays at home. We'll see what they end up doing. But it's been a long time since the team used a goalie rotation in the playoffs, but it used to be not that crazy to have the backup in net here and there. People didn't panic when it happened. Nowadays, though, the starter has to play every single game. Number 5 on the board, and moving up 2 spots from last week, New Jersey. So for Devils fans, they've been moving up the board for weeks now. They moved from 13 to 12 to 10 to 7. Now they're 5th. And I'm sure there will be people saying, well, actually, we should be 3rd because, and bless your hearts. So, it's not really how it works. It is a gradual move up. But New Jersey's playing well. And the best part is they've had some good home games as well. The road, we know they're excellent. But if they start playing well at home, they can, and they may very well end up winning the division. So, yeah, the East is going to be kind of fantastic because for anybody who's following along at home, Seattle's the highest rated team on the board in the West. These top 5, all Eastern-based teams. So if you're saying, I really wish Toronto had an easy opponent in the first round, good luck. There are no easy opponents in first rounds, and that goes for everybody in the East. I think from 1 through 8, it's going to be a tough one. Number 4 on the board, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Toronto. So Toronto, one spot drop, and they had that loss against Ottawa last night, which was ugly. But that I looked at more as a one-off, and I'm hoping that's that one-off. But if they struggle and they do have a couple more games this week, then they will drop before the power rankings I'm not doing next Saturday. But they're ahead of New Jersey, but it's a very precarious position they find themselves in, ahead of New Jersey. And maybe with the Rangers, the Kraken, the Oilers. Yeah, this is something that if Toronto has struggles, and without Matthews they could, and if they play like they did against Ottawa last night, they will. But I'm thinking they turn it around. Anytime people have been ready to just pass them and say, forget it. I remember the California swing. I had Toronto, 12th or 13th that week, and I saw Toronto fans saying, they should be in the bottom row. You shouldn't have them where they're terrible. And then a week later, I was being told, you hate them because they're not number 1. So, okay. But yeah, Toronto's number 4. Number 3 on the board, moving up 3 spots from last week, is Tampa. So, this is the funny thing. Again, there will be Tampa Bays where they are because you think about the Stanley Cups and last year in the final. No, they've won 12 in a row at home. Their road record is a bit of a problem, but at home, they've won 12 in a row. They beat Boston. That was a fantastic game, and I thought that really reflected how well Tampa Bay's playing. And so I had no anger at that game at all. I thought that was a great game for Tampa, and I think they belong in 3rd. But I was debating about whether or not to move them up higher than 3rd. So, number 2 on the board is Carolina. So for the Canes... and I've seen comments as well with Carolina's in 2nd. What? Yeah, they're playing well. They've got 9 regulation losses, which is less than everybody else on the board, other than team number 1. And for Carolina, it's been a really good season. Yeah, they've had some downbeats over the last month, but in general, they're playing really well. And I think they have a really good chance at winning the Stanley Cup. I do. I think they have a very solid chance at end up winning the whole thing. That being said, number 1 on the board, same as last week, Boston. Now, did they lose 2 in a row this week? Yes. They lost against Tampa Bay, and then today they lost against Florida. Was I upset when they didn't hold the lead in that 3rd period today? Oh, absolutely yes. But that being said, for Boston, they were overdue for a couple of games. And again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, you go through Tampa, you go through Florida, and then Carolina. It's going to be tough. So tomorrow they have Carolina. The odd thing is, if Carolina beats Boston tomorrow, Carolina would pass Boston and end up 1st on the board. So there's the possibility that if Carolina beats Boston tomorrow, that the power rankings, if they were on a Sunday night instead of Saturday night, would feature Carolina in 1st place instead of Boston. But we'll see what happens and what kind of a victory that would be and how it'll look. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Last power rankings for the next couple weeks, at least standard power rankings. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.